Hey, have you ever wondered why your talented team still struggles to innovate or collaborate, and why things just don't seem to click sometimes, no matter how smart everyone is? That sense of hidden fragility can quietly stall progress and sap your organization's energy. I know, I've felt it myself at times. In today's episode, Charlie Green, the co author of The Trusted Advisor, the bestseller, joins us to pull back the curtain on the rise of workplace fragility and the risk aversion among younger generations. The book's called The Anxious Generation, and we dig into why so many teams miss the mark when it comes to basic collaboration, and what leaders often overlook, and what's really at stake if we ignore it. What may surprise you and surprise me is how subtle the warning signs are and how much they could be costing your business right now. You'll come away with a fresh perspective and ideas you won't want to miss. I am so excited to have on the Delighted Customers podcast back on the show the co-author of The Trusted Advisor, the author of Trust-Based Selling, my friend, mentor, and colleague, Charlie Green.
Thanks, Mark. It's a pleasure to be back here.
It's always fun when we get together. I have so much respect for your body of work and tapping into something that I think isn't talked about enough, which is this whole idea of trust, trustworthiness, what it is, why it's so important. Society these days is so fixated on the next advance in technology,
Yes,
and the next shiny object, and you're talking about something very basic and foundational that makes everything work.
Yep. There you go. We can hang up the phone now. We're good. That covers it.
In previous episodes, you and I have broken down the trust equation. I encourage people to go back and listen. I'll include the link to those shows in the show notes. And I would also add that Charlie founded Trusted Advisor Associates, where he and I met, and I had the opportunity to work on his team and get certified. And that organization still exists, doesn't it, Charlie?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Yep, doing well.
And so today I want to talk about something you and I have talked about offline, but haven't talked about on the show. And that is centered around a book that triggered our interest in having this conversation, which is The Anxious Generation.
Right.
So could you share with our audience about what the book is, what it's about, and why it's important today?
Yeah, good. The title's The Anxious Generation. It's been on top of the New York Times nonfiction bestseller list for the better part of a year, I think. Jonathan Haidt, that's spelled Haidt, is the author. I know him somewhat. We're not friends, but we're better than acquaintances. He's very bright. He's written several other books, which are excellent in advance of this one. He's a very good writer, very good storyteller, and a very solid researcher. Super credentials. He's currently at NYU Stern School of Business. And the premise of the book, it goes into a lot of detail, all of which is interesting. But the basic premise is people born, I'm going to forget now, between I think 95 and 2005 or somewhere in that time, roughly Gen Z, would be accurate enough. People born in that time period have had an interesting life in the following three respects. Number one, he argues, and he's written previously, that particular group of people was done badly by their parents who were overprotective. Parenting grew into, prevent anything from that. Don't let the kid fall. Don't let him skin their knee. Don't let him play outside alone. Don't let him walk to the bus stop alone. And that had predictable, broad, emotional, social consequences. Then, as they grew into preteens and teens, this happened around the time of the invention of the iPhone, and in particular, social media. And he's got all kinds of stats about how emotional fragility, suicides, depression went up considerably. And he tracks it down to basically those two events in time. All the numbers have gone, wrong way, particularly among girls, although almost as much among boys. And then that generation, again, roughly Gen Z, started to go into business right around the time COVID hit. So on top of the emotionally dysfunctional life they had lived up until then, suddenly they're, along with the rest of the world, cast into modes of isolation right at the time when they're supposed to be getting, accustomed to their lifelong careers and entering business and so forth. Well, that generation, that group of people are now entering a mid-level in business. So I tend to focus on professional services like the big four consulting firms, Accenture, McKinsey, Deloitte, that kind of thing. Those are now roughly a quarter to a third, maybe a little more, of the total population of those firms. And if past this prologue, they're 90% of the future leadership of those firms. And here's what those people are doing. I teach every quarter or so. I do a webinar for one of the big four, and I've noticed 40% of them don't come on camera. This is for two-hour-long web sessions. They don't even come on camera. And it's not the people in their 40s. It's not the people in their, in their late teens. It's the people right smack in this generation. They're not stupid. They're very well educated. They're very bright by all the things that we put emphasis on. That's not the problem. The problem is they're emotionally fragile. They're risk averse. They don't know how to interact with other human beings and the conventional social things. How the heck are these firms going to manage being led in the future if they're not taking some significant action to correct the horrendous stuff that's happened to this new generation? So I'm summarizing the book, and I'm getting into some of the stuff that I'm interested in there.
You mentioned what the heck are leaders going to do? That's a great question. I want to talk a little bit about what you see as the potential risks for businesses who not only hire from the big four, but may have some people that fit this mold in their own organization.
It's just that I work with professional services, so those are the ones I see. The same is true for banks. The same is true for lots of organizations. The same age group is moving in, and the same issues in broad terms. I just tend to focus on that category.
So I would imagine some of the risk of people who are emotionally fragile, who are risk averse, who any organization that's interested in growing needs innovation,
right?
Needs people who are capable of leading and influencing and even sometimes persuading other people.
Yep, absolutely.
And that needs to happen by someone who's trustworthy, or at least it's more likely and more successful if it's done by someone who's considered trustworthy by their peers, supervisors, and their other colleagues. Would you agree?
Yes, I would. I think it's even more basic than the trust stuff, though. These are people who basically didn't learn the lessons that are taught in kindergarten. They didn't learn how to play nicely in the sandbox with other people. So take innovation. Innovation is not a solo act. It's a team act in many cases. Well, if you don't know how to get along with people in a small group, there goes your innovation. If you don't know how to interact with other people, there goes all the stuff about influence and persuasion, team leading, all that stuff. If you'd rather live life with your head buried in a computer or your phone, and we've all seen groups of people, 6, 8 people sitting at a dinner table, they're all looking at their phones. It isn't just that generation. Hey, we're guilty of it too. But this particular generation has been formed in its early adult life by those kinds of. They don't know the difference.
So, in terms of ramifications, Charlie, I'm in a group of people, either on a committee or within the organization, in a cross-functional meeting. And so, what do? Do I take my toys and go home, or do I act out and feel like someone has treated me poorly?
Yeah, well, I'm going to move away from what little data I have and I can't adequately do justice to Jonathan Haidt's book. But let's just talk common sense here. If you're emotionally fragile, you've been taught to be risk averse, then you're fearful. Well, if you're fearful, it's either my fault, in which case I feel horrible about myself, in which case I withdraw and become an alcoholic or something, or I blame other people. It's their fault. It's never my fault. So you end up with people who don't easily take responsibility and who are frightened by many aspects of social interactions or other reality. These are people who are naturally, it makes sense, hesitant to reach out to other people, hesitant to take interpersonal emotional risks, and don't seek solace in the company of other people, but rather by themselves. They don't know any better. They've never seen anything any different. So that's not a good recipe for lots of things.
Yeah, and so in the world that, the lens that I look through is through the customer's lens
Right.
as their advocate.
Yeah.
Change is inevitable because customers' desires change all the time, and we need to respond in a way. It doesn't mean we had to, sometimes it means we need to trash what we're offering today, but sometimes it just means modifications. And that means internally that people need to work cross-functionally well
Right.
together, and the status quo is not going to survive in a world that's constantly changing. So you need people willing to bend, flex,
Yes.
hear other advice that may make them feel a bit uncomfortable.
Yep. Exactly. I think that sounds exactly right to me.
And would some of the misconceptions that senior leaders have about this category of employees or outside consultants?
Yeah, again, I can't react from broad data, just,
Yeah.
anecdotes and perceptions. I think it's very easy for folks of our generation or my generation. I'll take the blame myself. What's left of the boomers? The kids, the kids are screwed up. It's not like it was back in the day. So it's easy to be judgmental and look at all the silliness that's going on,
Hmm.
or simply not notice it and say, "Wow, these kids are smart today." They know computer. I could never do. They'd never hire me today. These kids know stuff that I can't even imagine, and we need to hire more of them to get into AI or something like that. So I really don't see. I mean, I've started mentioning this topic around a few people, and it's people like, hadn't really thought about that before. And I think that's probably true. They haven't thought about it before. So doesn't mean it's not happening. It is happening, but I don't see a lot of structured thought having been given to it.
Yeah. So, what are some of the warning signs that one of them you mentioned, if you see the camera turned off?
Yeah, that one really sticks. That's what actually provoked my thinking about this in the first place. This happened, several times. I noticed it was a consistent percentage, and I thought, that's weird. What's going on? That's one. I did speak with somebody the other day who's been in college recruiting for about 8 years for a large professional services firm. And I asked her just kind of open-ended white space question, what have you seen? What's going on? And the word she chose was fragility, which made a lot of sense. These people, she says, they're fragile. They're easily broken, and they don't bend easily. They break easily. They don't have a lot of resilience. They retreat, fight or flight, I suppose, mostly flight. So you think about, what does fragility do? It's the antithesis of a resilient organization, of a proactive organization, of one that tries new things, as you mentioned, doesn't form friendships easily. I think she came up with a good word. Fragility sums up quite a bit, and it's consistent with what Jonathan Haidt also talks about.
And so, in practical terms, like if I'm a leader, how might I notice people before we get into what we can potentially do to support, drive success in organizations like this? Some strategies around that. What do you think would be? I mean, obviously, we talked about people not showing up or putting their cameras on, but what might be some other warning signs?
Well, I hear you and I are brainstorming a little
Yeah.
bit. I don't have a whole lot of data, but I would think, you remember there was a book 20 years ago, Robert Putnam, Bowling Alone, and
Mm.
he looked at sort of the depersonalization of society in general, and his little indicator was you don't see bowling leagues anymore like you used to.
Mm.
If people still go bowling, they go alone rather than hanging out with a club. Well, there are a lot of parallels in business. There are and informal groupings and get-togethers and mentor teams and social activities and volunteers and softball teams. And, keep an eye on how those things are doing. I got to think that they're probably under siege in the past 10 years or so. COVID didn't help, particularly to the extent that people are still working remotely. There's a lot of advantages to that, but there's some obvious disadvantages, and that's one of them. So I guess that's one set of indicators. And I think just become more observant of people's interactions on your group, on your team. Are they comfortable challenging each other, or do they retreat into politeness and being offended? Because if you can't get to the point where you can have a robust dialogue with other people, again, you either retreat into, being hurt or watching so that nobody is offensive. Neither of which is good. You want to have relationships that can stand up to, dialogue and not take everything personally. So I'm thinking that's something that managers can look out for.
Yeah, those are great tips. I think, we live in a hybrid world now where some employees work on site, some work remote, some work in some sort of blend
Right.
of the two. If you're in person, I imagine there's a number of nonverbal clues that you could be looking for as a manager.
Yeah. Even as I was thinking about that example of people not coming on camera, 5 years ago, we were all bemoaning the fact that, we're just looking at Zoom, a two-dimensional electronic image, as opposed to being in person, with 3D and smell and touch and all that. But even on Zoom, I mean, you can look at people, you can look in the eye, you can see their facial expressions, but not if they're not on camera. We give up a lot when that one goes out. So I think it's possible to actually create semi-authentic connections even on Zoom calls more than we would have thought 5 years ago.
Well, let's talk about, we talked about some of the risk. We talked about some of the warning signs, things we could look out for. We talked about maybe the why on how we got here. Let's talk about some ways, some strategies that if you're a leader, you could still run a successful organization and incorporate people who grew up in this time period. What comes to mind is some strategies?
Well, the first thing that comes to my mind is talk about it. Legitimize talking about it. I mean, people are always flattered when you talk about it. Say, hey, you guys here are all between 25 and 32 or whatever. What's it like? What's it like for you? And give people a chance to articulate. I mean, that's the basis of talk therapy, right? And it works to some extent. Plus, people like being paid attention to. Organize conversations, individual or group. That's certainly one. Stories and vignettes, video clips. These are old tried and true techniques of training, and they work reasonably well. I know in my stuff I use video. We have great conversations about watching two people interact. One thing I notice, even among this generation, I'll show them a sort of good tape and a really good tape of an interaction between two parties. And I'll ask them, thumbs up or down, people, get ready. Was the second one better or worse than the first one? Every single one of them will say they're better. And they're right. It was better. But think about that. None of these people are trained sociologists or psychologists. They're all accountants and consultants, right? But they all have that gut feel. That was better. And so I point that out. You realize you did pick up something in kindergarten. You all have human gut feelings. We've been around for millennia, hundreds of thousands of years. And these instincts are base and basic and very finely tuned. And you didn't miss out on that. You still have it within you to recognize good and not good. So let's talk about why it was good. What did it? What made that better? And then you can get into micro behaviors or intentions or wherever you go. But at least you're talking about it with people.
But Charlie, what do you say to the person who says, well, I tested, I'm an introvert, and I just want to come in, really just do my job. I have a very independent job, I just need to run numbers or run data or collect data. And I don't really enjoy interacting with other people.
Yeah, well, I can personally relate to that. I've actually been kind of an introvert, and I always need to gin up a lot of energy to get out and interact with people. But, I mean, a couple answers. Number one, sorry, that's not life. That's not your job. Get used to it. Deal with it. And at the same time, you need to be sympathetic and say, yeah, it does suck. I get you. But we need some of this and some of that. Let's make sure we come up with some ways that give you reconstituting time, give you a chance to build up your juices, but you also need to get out there and interact with other people. So I guess, recognition that you're not alone. It's not a bad feeling, but also reality is not going to conform itself to you wanting to cubbyhole yourself all day long either.
Yeah, I think there's, from my experience, there's always a tie back to the corporate values that are stated. Usually there's something like teamwork or integrity or alignment or something like that where, first of all, people aren't, if they were solopreneurs, they'd be solopreneurs. So then you get to do whatever you want and you take the risks associated with it.
True.
But if you get hired by an organization, you're part of it. By definition, you're part of a team, unless they say you're not. There are, I guess, some very specialized jobs where you're not. For the most part, you're part of a team. I mean, the joke is even Tiger Woods had a coach,
Right.
And all the pros have coaches in almost every sport now. And you're part of a team, and that has certain inferences to it, right?
Yeah. I think that's an important part of the answer. You're right. I mean, a business is a form of social organization, among other things, and, emphasis on social. But it's also true, and I don't know where this fits in the dialogue, people who give in to, you might call it introversion, but who live that and become isolated are statistically in the broader society more at risk of suicide, less likely to get married, less likely to have all kinds of downfalls, health, etc. So there's that outside the work context as well. Some people don't react to that well, some do.
What do you see, Charlie? You mentioned the span of years that encompasses this generation. What do you see in the generation following that generation?
Well, I'll give you another. I do some webinars also with a group of college kids who are 19 and 20, and I see the opposite. I mean, those ones I do on a Saturday morning, and every one of them, 100% of them show up on camera. They may be in their pajamas, the cat may be walking on the keyboard, they may be spilling coffee, they got their slippers on, they don't care. They're okay with it. So I find that sort of optimistic. Good. We want to encourage more of that among your older brothers and sisters. So, yeah, they've got their own issues, I think, with a lot of the tech stuff can be awfully introverting and we live in a society which for decades now has overemphasized the role of technology and data and empirical and behavior and gotten away from kind of the human stuff. They also seem to know how to have a good time and they're not afraid of getting on camera. So I'm optimistic about that.
Interesting conversation. Always love talking to you.
Likewise.
The Anxious Generation, and the author's name is Hit. What's his first name, Jonathan?
Jonathan Haidt, Haidt.
Haidt, okay. Fascinating. We'll put the link to that book in the show notes and invite Jonathan to come on the show anytime he'd like.
Good luck. I reached out to him the other day, and I know him. And I said, I'd love to chat with you for 15 minutes. His 3 handlers and PR people got back to me and said, he's awfully busy. All right, tell him I said hi. He is busy. He's got, he's all over network television and cable and everything. But still a good book.
Yeah. Charlie, let's land the plane with the question that I like to ask my guests, which is what delights you as a customer?
Great question. I didn't expect that coming. Let's see.
Sorry.
That's okay. I like it when there's sometimes when I don't want to interact personally at all. I don't need to have a chat with the bank teller, or I'm not one of those that enjoys chatting up the Starbucks barista.
Very topical. Yeah, based on today's topic.
Oh, yes, right. But there are a lot of times, even with customer service reps who say, "How's your day going?" and actually mean it, and you can tell it in their voice. Those are little moments for me. Those are little moments of delight. You connect just for a fraction with another human being, and it's not a gimmick, and they're not reading a script. It feels genuine. That delights me.
Excellent. Well, that's great sentiment and a lesson in there if you're in the CSR world.
Yeah, I think so.
Charlie, thank you so much for being a guest. If people want to get a hold of you to reach out, what's the best way?
Email is cgreen, that's CGREEN, at trustedadvisor.com with an OR at the end. cgreen at trustedadvisor.com. That's probably the best way. Or on LinkedIn.
Perfect. Charlie, thanks so much for being back on the show.
Thank you, Mark. Always a pleasure.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Delighted Customers podcast. It would mean so much if you would take a moment to subscribe. You can go to Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, or wherever you listen to podcasts, click on the plus sign or follow button, and that will ensure that you don't miss an episode and it helps get the word out to others. While you're there, I'd love it if you leave a 5-star review. I look forward to seeing you back here next Thursday. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Delighted Customers podcast. It would mean so much if you would take a moment to subscribe.
You can go to Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, or wherever you listen to podcasts, click on the plus sign or follow button, and that will ensure that you don't miss an episode, and it helps get the word out to others. While you're there, I'd love it if you'd leave a 5-star review. I look forward to seeing you back here next Thursday.